All right. Well, speaking of interviews given by Trump, Maria Bartiromo, and again, credit to her, asked him some challenging questions in his recent interview with her. And Trump's probably most eyebrow-raising comments came when he was asked about, Election Day. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Let's remember, you've got 50,000 Chinese nationals in this country in the last couple of years. Yeah. You have people on the terrorist watch list, 350 in the last couple of years. You got, like you said, 13,000 murderers and 15,000 rapists. Right. What are you expecting? Joe Biden said he doesn't think it's going to be a peaceful election day.
Well, he doesn't have any idea what's happening in all fairness. He spends most of his day sleeping. I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of election day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
The radical left enemy from within should be handled by the National Guard or, if necessary, the military. I mean, I want to say that before the last election, I downplayed the possibility of what ended up unfolding with January 6th and how far they went with the fake elector slates, et cetera. And I always kind of cringe to talk about concerns about democracy, but this is outrageous thing for him to say. And it is scary, although this time, he's not in control of the federal government, so he doesn't have control of the military, so that's a good thing. But, you and I both think that the most likely outcome is that this election is very, very close. And when I hear comments like this from him, I find it deeply unsettling at what the country could be in for if it is another, once again, razor-thin election. And we all know he's not going to just nicely concede.
Look, I get it. I guess I would put myself in this camp. Let's put the New York Times piece up on the screen because I actually think this is a good psychological analysis. It's the Trump voters who don't believe Trump. It says, when the former president endorses violence and proposes using government to attack his enemies, many supporters assume it's just an act. The former president has talked about weaponizing the Justice Department. What we just talked about with with everything. There is, of course, evidence to the contrary, they say, for the people who don't believe him. But one of the ways that voters think another term might go, it's how they rationalize his rhetoric by affording him a reverse benefit of the doubt. They doubt and he benefits. So last Thursday, this reporter from the New York Times, Sean McCreesh, who, by the way, is a very good reporter, he just went through and he talked to several of these people. And a lot of them were like, look, I think that the media blows this stuff out of proportion for sensationalism. They're like, I don't believe that he would actually do it. Sipped his iced tea, says, I don't. So why? And then they're like, well, why is he saying he wants to do it? It could just be for publicity. He's just riling up the news. I do think there's probably some element to this. But, I recently was asked on a podcast, are you really worried about the aftermath of the election? I actually think things are more likely to go better this time than last time. A lot of the uncertainty is gone. So, for example, the Electoral Count Act now does not even allow for whatever that whole vice president situation to happen for certification. In terms of everyone was worried about the false elector scheme, now the Electoral Count Act has it so that the governors of those states are the ones who declare for certification. 5 out of the 7 swing states have Democratic governors. One of them, who's a Republican, is Brian Kemp, who stood up to Trump on. So all of the processes through which you would see some sort of January 6th style thing, it can't really happen again. Now, that doesn't mean violence and rallying, all that couldn't happen. But the actual stuff that you want to hang on to, it's not there. Same if you look at, power of the government. I mean, last time around, Trump's own Attorney General, Bill Barr, said that it was bullshit. He literally said, I'm just quoting him. He said, this is bullshit, and wrote a whole book about it. We talked about how he wouldn't execute his orders. Trump is not in power this time around. A lot of the levers that they tried to grasp for, look, they can go to the legal system again, go for it. I mean, you got shot down on every single case last time around. I guess I'm just not as worried. Another thing is how can you be a Trump supporter and have you watch these January 6 people all locked up in prison for years or held in the D.C. county jail with the feds crawling so far in their lives that they're like bankrupt from legal fees and think that you would want to participate in this again? Or how would you want to be one of his lawyers to try and help execute this when every single one of those people ends up pleading guilty in a court of law? Like, all of the incentive structure for a J6 2.0, I don't see it as existing. And look, that's just cope, maybe on my behalf, but I'm just like, I don't see how it can happen again.
I mean, in certain respects, yes, because like I said, he doesn't control the federal government.
He literally is
That's
not the
the
president.
main difference. That doesn't mean there isn't a lot of trouble that he could cause. And, you know, I understand too why people, the people they interviewed at the New York Times say, I don't really take him seriously. Like, he chanted lock her up and then he didn't lock her up and all of that. But he did incite January 6th, and he did go to great lengths to actually overturn the results of the election. I mean, that's just a fact. The fake elector slates that his own people were referring to as fake, being offered in different states, pressuring Mike Pence with everything he could to not certify the election. Picking J.D. Vance, I think, as his vice president, primarily because J.D. Vance said, I would have done what Mike Pence wouldn't do last time around. And so, you have a man that his supporters really don't trust anyone but him. If he says this was rigged and stolen and, they're doing it again and take your country back and whatever, I don't want to underestimate, especially when he's out making comments like this and sort of setting things up for that. I don't want to underestimate what that could look like and what it could do for the country. I mean, I think you even acknowledged like, oh, yeah, the possibility of violence is real. I'm not saying there's any guarantees here, but I do think because we were heading for such a razor-thin election, if he loses, I do think it could be another extraordinarily difficult and ugly time in American politics. So that's all I'd say about that is like, he didn't follow through on all of his talk, but you can't underestimate him when January 6th and the fake electors and all of that stuff really did happen. And of course, we also know how much of a freak out there would be if like Kamala Harris said something similar about calling out the National Guard and the U.S. military to deal with her political opponents, which is what he said. And by the way, they are seizing on these comments on the trail and talking about them.
Oh yeah, they're definitely, look, by the way, do I think it helps Trump? No. I mean, dude, it's like, yeah, let's talk about this whenever a bunch of people specifically rejected you and your style of stop the steal candidates all across all the swing states. So maybe that's a little bit of a problem. I wouldn't be talking this way. I don't see JD talking this way. He doesn't even bring up the election unless he's pressed on it 5 times in an interview. Maybe sounds smart to me, but look, it's Trump and he can decide what he wants to do. Look, first of all, if he wins, it's not an issue, right? So there you go. He'll take power and he's 2 termed out and then it's over. In terms of the loss, all of the stuff that they could have that they tried to do last time is now either illegal, has been prosecuted, or the policy has changed. Can he try and incite? I wouldn't even say incite violence. Can he try and have rallies and all that? Yes, certainly. But again, if you are so dumb, it's to go to a Trump rally protesting the election and then break into the Capitol, honestly, then you deserve to go to jail again because you literally watched what happened to the first time around. So there seems to be a lot of incentives in play here where, maybe I'm Pollyanna. People can roll this clip back on January 6th next year around, but I'm optimistic. I don't think it's going to be that bad.
So we also have Mike Flynn, who of course was a member of Trump's previous administration, forced out, resigned under some scandals, basically like caught being a foreign agent. He was asked a question about potentially not just draining the swamp, but executing the swamp to great applause from the supporters in the room. Let's take a listen to how that went.
Is there any chance that should the election go in a positive result, you would get your rank reinstated and sit at the head of a military tribunal to not only drain the swamp, but imprison the swamp, and on a few occasions, execute the swamp?
Your sentiment is like a lot of people that I speak to around this country, and for years now, for the last 4 years of my life, I've been around this country, all over the country. I've been to over 100 cities just, doing my thing, which is basically telling the American people, you better wake up here, folks. There's no more, well, we're going to go through just another election. All these elections are the same. But what your sentiment is about is accountability, okay? Accountability. And these people are already up to no good. So we got to win first. We win, and then Katie bar the door. Okay? Believe me, the gates of hell, my hell, will be unleashed.
look,
your
again,
thoughts on that,
I think
Saagar?
people seize on this stuff. Mike Flynn has no connection to the campaign. He was fired after 33 days or whatever as a national security advisor. I believe I need to make sure exactly what happened here, but he either pled guilty or he had some situation with the foreign agent stuff that happened
The
at that
Turkish
time.
government?
Yeah, it was. I covered it so much at the time. It was something like
the thing is,
Gulen
though-
and Erdogan. He basically has made a career of like QAnon style adjacent like events and like bankrolling himself since then. So I'm not worried about this. I don't think that Mike Flynn speaks with any authority whatsoever.
But
for the
is what
campaign.
he's saying that different
Yeah.
from what Trump has been saying? Because Trump is saying, like, I will be your retribution and calling out the National Guard and the military. I mean, it seems pretty consistent with the sentiments that Trump himself is expressing.
I mean, in terms of I will be your retribution, he said that last time around. And what did it look like? Mostly like hiring people like Mike Flynn and it not working out so well. To the extent that it would be nice is if, hey, we actually did fire a bunch of people on the side of the CIA and the FBI. I don't think that's so bad. I guess it's about degrees and it's about which and how you interpret like what that looks like and what's extreme or whatever's not. Like, to me, I think Schedule F is a great idea. I think more than half of these people should be fired. Is that what Mike Flynn is talking about? No. And that's another thing too, where if you have to point to his track record.
When you say the gates of hell are going to be unleashed, or I'll be a retribution,
But he's not, has no connection to the campaign.
I'll call out the National Guard or the military should deal with my political opponents. That's not about Schedule F.
No, but he says this shit all the time. How much of it actually happened? I was there when Trump was like, I'm going to take military funding and build the border wall, and then shut down the government for 3 weeks, and then caved to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. In practice, how does this shit actually work? Like, most of the time, it doesn't usually work out to his benefit. It turns out that there are decent checks and balances in the American system. Look, we could play the next part here, and this is probably more consequential, from J.D. Vance when he was asked about who the most consequential part of the government will be. He said the Attorney General. Let's take a listen.
On the Attorney General, you said on Friday that the most important person in government in a Trump-Vance administration, other than the president, is not you. It would be the Attorney General. Why do you consider that the most important spot, the second most important spot?
Well, one reason, Martha, is just public opinion. And what I mean here is that we really want the American people to believe that we have a fair and equitable administration of justice. If not, the entire sort of system falls apart. You need people to believe that if the Attorney General prosecutes somebody, it's motivated by justice and law and not by politics. And unfortunately,
would Donald Trump go after his political opponents? Would Donald Trump go after his political opponents? He suggested that in the past.
Martha, he was president for 4 years, and he didn't go after his political opponents. You know who did go after her political opponents? Kamala Harris, who has tried to arrest everything from pro-life activists to her political opponents.
He said those people who cheated will be
prosecuted as a weapon against people. Well, he said that people who violated our election laws will be prosecuted. I think that's the administration of law. He didn't say people are going to go to jail because they disagree with me. That has, in fact, been the administration and the policy of Kamala Harris, Martha.
I mean, a lot of people looked at that and said he was going to prosecute. I think look, this is much more bureaucratic. It's about having somebody who, rules that a certain program or whatever can be legal, because a lot of that comes back to like how you interpret certain bureaucratic actions. The shutdown thing I just talked about was a good example. Trump used some legal maneuvers to make sure that he had executive authority to try and divert fundings toward a border wall. That's the way that I looked at it, especially with the whole Merrick Garland thing. I understand this whole prosecute political opponents and stuff, but I mean, Trump is the one who was indicted by the Biden administration. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know why it's supposed to be so scary to watch this clip. It seems entirely consistent with the view of what went wrong with the previous Trump administration.
Well, I think it's because of the things that Trump's been saying, which is, he posted on Truth Social, when I win, those people that cheated will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences so that the depravity of justice does not happen again. He added, those involved in unscrupulous behavior will be sought out, caught, and prosecuted at levels unfortunately never seen before in our country. So, it's very convenient to just sort of dismiss anything that he says that goes too far. But I don't think that you can fairly do that at this point, given what we saw after the last election. And so that's where the J.D. Vance comments come in, is like, okay, now you have not just Trump mouthing off on Truth Social, you have J.D. Vance affirmatively saying like, the attorney general, who would be the person going after these people, locking them up or whatever, is the second most important person in government. You got Michael Flynn, who was a close associate, talking about these things. And you've got Trump himself, making multiple comments, not just the one that I just, that we played before, talked about before with regard to the National Guard and military. But he said he'd purge the government of non-loyalists. He said that there would be one really violent day when police officers could get extraordinarily rough with impunity. He's talked about mass deportations that would be a, quote, bloody story. And it's very convenient to just dismiss all of the things that are like uncomfortable and embrace the ones that you happen to like, especially at this point, again, maybe before January 6th and all the fake electors crap and, the like actual plans that we know at this point were hatched and rejected to try to seize voting machines and all this stuff. But I just don't think you can hand wave it away at this point the way that previously perhaps it would be reasonable to.
Do I take it like very, very seriously? No. Look, maybe I'm naive. I believe mostly in the American system. If the Attorney General genuinely did try to bring, under Donald Trump, tried to have a grand jury in Washington, D.C., indict people for, for voter fraud based on Venezuelan dominion, I just simply believe that wouldn't happen, or it wouldn't go through the justice system, even if Trump wanted it to go through. So sure, the Attorney General can try. In terms of practice, like, how do I think he means it? What I just talked about in terms of legal opinion, making sure, let's make sure, for example, that we want to change the way that we take census data, that we do it properly so the Supreme Court doesn't strike us down, and make sure that it goes down because of a legal error. Literally, by the way, that's what happened under the first Trump administration. So I think the system works mostly fine. In terms of what the opinion is or whatever, is there a risk, for what you're talking about? Certainly. I guess I just think what those people mostly expressed here, it's like, how seriously are you really supposed to take it completely literally? In the way I just laid out, I don't think you can take it completely literally.
But like January 6th doesn't change your assessment of that at all.
Considering that the law has changed, no. I mean, yeah, because the law has changed so significantly. If you had asked me under the previous regime, I'd be like, yeah, I'm actually a lot more worried. But because the law changed with the bipartisan Electoral Count Act, I'm like, not really. Not the way that it currently is. It's physically impossible for them to try and do what they did last time around.
You're just considering like the specifics of what happened last time around. If he's back as president of the United States and all of the powers that entails, he could cause a lot of trouble. There's a lot of things that he could do that wouldn't look exactly like January 6th. And I'm just arguing.
But he wouldn't do that because he'd be a two-term for president.
I'm just arguing. I'm not even talking specifically about like stealing the election again or whatever. My whole point is that I don't think at this point, given what we've seen from him, that you can just hand wave away as, he doesn't really mean it. Because in the past, we've seen him mean it, and we've seen him cause a lot of trouble based on following through on the, over-the-top rhetoric that he's used in the past. So that's it. That's my whole point is I don't think that it's fair or honest to just, hand wave away anything that he says that is like,
I wouldn't hand wave it away, but some of the things you listed, for example,
some
of the things you listed, I'm like, that sounds pretty good. Purging the government of non-loyalists, that sounds great, actually. I think the president should be in charge, for example, of national security.
He says he wouldn't hire anyone who admits the 2020 election wasn't stolen. That's what he means by that. Well, That's what he means by loyalty, is you have to be willing to lie and say the election was stolen and do literally whatever I say, no matter how outrageous or fraudulent it ultimately is. He doesn't mean like you're going to stand by my tariff policy.
I mean, we have no evidence of that. He's not currently in power.
No, because he literally said, I won't hire anyone who admits the 2020 election wasn't stolen. So that's the evidence. It's his own words.
Then we'll have a very, very small pool to choose from, and they're welcome to do that and pursue that policy if they want to. And they will be able to hire maybe like 5 people. Like, that's what I mean. Maybe if he really does that, then he's an idiot, and then people shouldn't vote for him. You can decide for yourself. That's what I'm saying. I'm giving my assessment of how I would look at it. Mass deportation, yeah. The libs are going to fight tooth and nail. Every Catholic charity and all these people are going to sue with some fake Hawaii judge to make it. So, yeah, I support mass deportation. I want an attorney general that would make sure that that was legally executed. So it's one of those where what you think is radical, I think is actually necessary. And probably vice versa, too, in terms of what? Legalizing weed?
One violent day in which police officers could get extraordinarily rough with impunity.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that that's not legal or even probably like
calling
able to
out
be
the
declared
military
legal
against your political opponent. indictments.
Again, I don't think that that's legal. It's never happened before. Or let's think about when's the last time that it happened.
Saagar, I just think that there's a real double standard in the way that you analyze his words versus the words of, literally any Democratic politician.
I mean, I guess it just comes back to when we have
You don't believe him.
Yeah, I actually just don't believe it'll happen. No, I believe
he would do it
if he
You pick out the ones that you
could.
like, and you say, those ones will happen. But the ones I don't like,
No.
I'm just going to
I'll be honest
pretend
and
those
say
didn't happen.
that if he could do it, I think that he would. But I believe in the American system enough to say that most of the shit's not going to happen regardless.
Okay.
That's what I think. Okay. I think that if he could do it, he would. I also think Democrats would do a lot of the stuff if they would. They literally indicted Trump. I mean, they indicted him under January 6th.
Committed crimes.
Huh? I mean, again, that's a pretty subjective way of looking at it. And I don't think it would be all that easy. I just think, first of all, that probably punctures a
They
little bit
also
of the
indicted
bubble.
Hunter Biden and Bob Menendez and Eric Adams. So
I mean, to Hunter Biden, it took, 5 years of crawling, to the, bringing it into media story to actually get him charged. If he was any normal citizen, he would have been charged like a decade ago. So I don't think that's particularly a great example.
Bob Menendez, Eric Adams.
Bob Menendez was indicted previously, skipped the charge, and the only reason he got indicted is because he's so cartoonishly corrupt. Now, not saying it isn't a good thing. I support that. I think all corrupt people should be prosecuted. I'm trying to answer the question very honestly, which is, yeah, I think if he could do it, he would. But I don't think that he can with the American system. That's pretty simple. I mean, if in a certain sense, that's what a lot of those people in the New York Times in the New York Times profile were saying too.
So you trust the institutions, bottom line.
Mostly. I mean, they've been stress tested by and large. Have there been some slippage, I guess you could say? Yes, certainly. But if you look at it and the way that most of this stuff, especially the most egregious, like if you wanted to call out, the military to prosecute your political opponents, you have to really think about how the level of chain of command and number of people who would have to go along with that to actually happen. Now, would he do that if he wanted to? Maybe he would. I don't know. But it's one of those where if you look also at the type of people who are in charge of the military, you have his old chief of staff, General Mark Milley, being like, I think he's a fascist. So, do you think that the person who replaced him, who's basically, a clone, would he execute an order like that? I'm like, I don't really think so.
So if Kamala Harris came out and said, I'm going to potentially use the military to go after my political opponents, or the military should go after my political opponents, you'd be like, the system won't allow it.
Oh, no, I would be like, yeah, I think that's kind of crazy. I also don't think that it would happen. I mean, don't you think that that's a rational response? Do we think that the military would obey that order?
I don't think that you would be as sanguine about it if it was from a politician like Kamala Harris or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or whoever. I don't think you would just be like, oh, the system will hold, so whatever. It's fine.
I wouldn't say whatever. I think a lot of this is baked in with Trump. And this is also, look, I mean, this is a difficult position, right?
It is baked in with Trump. That is true.
Americans are stuck in a two-party system. It's very difficult. What are we supposed to do? I mean, you're in a scenario where if you disagree with somebody on 40%, but you agree on 60, you should probably vote for the 60. I didn't design the system. I think it's bad. It's one of those two where you have to really weigh a lot of checks and balances about things that you maybe very, very viciously object to, or even think about, and then think about what the overall direction of the ship or whatever is going to point when they have their hands on the steering wheel. I don't think it's good. I don't think most people want to be in this position, but they are in this position, right? And so when you think about this attorney general stuff, you have to weigh it for what you think is important, in which way that you think it will go, and then on balance with all the other things that combine with the federal government. So do I think this is a great thing? No, I don't necessarily. But I mean, I'm sure it's forever. There's a lot of liberals who watch our show who are outraged about Gaza. I mean, you should be honest and know that Trump will probably empower Israel to do even more than what you want. So, honestly, if I were you, I would vote for Kamala if that was your number one issue. I would vote for Kamala. I will tell you that right now. That's kind of hypocritical in some ways, but in a real politic way, that's what you should do. That's how most people have to assess their voting. That's how you should assess it on all things.
But that's not really my point. My point is just, at this show, we try to put, we obviously both have different lenses and different, partisan inclinations and ideologies, but we try to put the principles and the facts first. And I just think if you're going to analyze, a statement like, I'm going to call out the military against my political opponents, I think that should be analyzed in the same way, whether it comes from a Kamala Harris or whether it comes from a Donald Trump.
I agree.
Regardless of who you happen to prefer for the election.
Totally. I mean, in terms of, like I said, I think it's kind of crazy. I think he would do it if he could. I think that's bad. I mean, but it's also, do I think it would happen? Probably not. I think probably the same with Kamala if she tried to do so. Although, I don't know. I have to think about that one too, in terms of the way the military and how that would be executed. That would be my response. And I think how a lot of people look at it for democratic overreach, where they're like, well, in general, I trust the institutions. I don't necessarily think that that's a good thing, but this is who the person that I would choose to prefer to be in charge of the country. That's how a lot of rationalization, all this works. And for a lot of people who watch the show, they find that really, really difficult. And I agree. I also find it very, very difficult. I think 99% of people are stuck in a system they don't necessarily want to have to grapple with all of these questions. But it was the reality that was presented to us. And as much as I love, one thing I do love is to talk to Jill Stein, because it's one of those where, look, I don't agree with her on a lot, but I love her optimism and her theory about breaking all this, power and all this. But I haven't seen any real evidence of it. I thought RFK was one of the last people who could do it, but he decided to drop out and to endorse Trump. Yeah. So in a way, he actually validated everything that I'm saying here, which is, RFK has so many of the same criticisms probably that you just laid out about the attorney general, about why Trump was unfit and all of that. But he's like, but I think he'll stick with me on my Maha policy. And that's enough for me to come out and be like, yeah, you should vote Trump. And you should just have to reconcile yourself with that.
There's a lot going on with RFK Jr. I won't get into that one.
Okay, fine.
All right, let's talk about the Trump assassination.
Sure.
Let's move on to
let's get to it.
The theoretical assassination.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.